Hi, I'm Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I have the distinct pleasure of chatting with Ginny Clarke. She's the CEO of Ginny Clarke, LLC, and the author of the classic Career Mapping, Charting Your Course in the New World of Work. How are you?
Doing great, Scott. Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure to chat with you. You have been in leadership, in executive leadership, in coaching for many years. Previously, you did work at Google. You did led a whole team of recruiters. You have a long and storied career, and I very much enjoyed your now classic, almost 10-year-old book now, Career Mapping, Charting Your Course in the New World of Work. And you've started showing up on my Instagram feed as well, with just kind of making my feed a little more positive and a little more empowered. And I just thank you for that so much.
Thank you. I'm glad you got the vibe. That's what I was going for.
I definitely got the vibe. I know that the book is a little bit older right now, but it didn't read like it was written 10 years ago. It seems somewhat prescient. It acknowledges personal branding. It acknowledges imposter syndrome. It acknowledges a lot of things that we talk about now with fresh eyes. Was it unusual for you to identify things like executives having imposter syndromes so long ago?
No, because I was an executive recruiter. And so, I've reviewed probably hundreds of thousands of resumes and assessed thousands of executives. And I saw a lot of these behaviors that might not have had the current label, but I witnessed these dynamics, and I consider myself a bit of an empath and pretty intuitive. And so in addition to being trained to do competency-based assessment and to really assess these individuals with rigor, I tried to tap in and see what else was going on. Because I have like this radar that is, I don't try to broadcast because I don't want people to feel self-conscious, but I just sense things about people that they don't always speak of.
You call out very early in the book that when someone is looking for a job, they need to have a free agent mentality. And you call out that they need to be self-aware, introspective, and have their ego in check. And that term ego comes up multiple times in your work and in your book. I hear that people who are at the highest levels, CEO levels and C-suite, have big egos because they wouldn't make it there otherwise. How do you reconcile keeping your ego in check, servant leadership, with that high performance that's required in this society to be in C-suite?
Frankly, I think that's a bit of an archaic model. And this whole notion of needing to have a big ego. I'll go here a little bit, but that's and I'm not bashing men, but I do think I talk a lot about the divine male and the divine feminine. They're references to energies. And to the extent that women came into the workforce later, we walked into these constructs that were developed by men. Men tend to lead more. I'm generalizing, but men and women both have some of these energies. In the absence of women being around to balance them out, arguably, okay, men have this dominant, I'm going to charge the hill, I want to beat you out. It's all these sort of primal urges from when we were probably cavemen and women. And, this whole ego thing goes with that. Women come in to the extent that we have been expected to emulate men. You're going to see some of that behavior. But I think more recently, in the last 20, 30 years, women are realizing, and so are some of these men, that we can bring a great energy that can help balance what I think is required going forward. So ego, to me, you need some ego, but to be narcissistic, to be self-centered, those things I don't think serve anyone well. So I think we're seeing a new orientation that is focused on self-awareness and empathy and some of these things that acknowledge the humanity in all of this.
I really appreciate the way you frame that. I mean, there is a redefinition of what masculinity means. I'm a computer person, so there's a slider bar of like masculine to feminine, and it's a spectrum that we work through. And, a bunch of dudes duding, a bunch of bros hanging out. Like, I am guilty of that because I tell my young teenage sons that, you and your buddy hanging out's one thing, but 4 or 5 teenage boys, like the IQ, the collective IQ in the room kind of lowers. You got to balance that out a little bit, with some other perspectives, because otherwise you just kind of goofing around in front of the gas and sip and you're going to get into trouble. And that's kind of what we see in the C-suite.
Yeah, well, for sure. Therein lies the perils of homogeneity. Let's put it that way.
That is actually a really good point. So you said you're going to go there. I'm going to go somewhere interesting. It is of note, I think. It's on you. You are 6'1".
Yeah. I think I've shrunk an inch. I'm 6 feet.
Okay, so you're 6 feet tall. In moving through space as a Black woman in a leadership position, now today, I think it would be fair to say, an elder, and that you have so much experience.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But also with this kind of, in the unpacking of privilege, you have this height privilege, and we look for height in our leaders intuitively. Has that worked for you or against you, bringing both feminine energy but also physical presence to a space when you are leading?
I think it's mostly worked for me, mostly. At the same time, here's what a couple of things that it did. People notice me. Some people are intimidated by the height. There were times when I would try to play small. You can't hide being 6 feet tall. You walk into a room, people see you. But it taught me to pay attention, to be cognizant, and to sort of, again, reading some other people's energy and to attempt to put them at ease. And so I think that became sort of a superpower. I'm not shying away. My mother used to poke me in the back to make me stand up straight. So at the same time, I think it was advantageous because it offered me this awareness of myself relative to other people and tried to forge a bridge to find that connection for us to come together. That was sort of the upside and the downside. People remembered me. I had somebody recently that I hadn't seen for 35 years, and he said, this was a very accomplished gentleman, now in his 80s. And he said, Ginny, we were at an alumni thing at Kellogg, walked into his home. He said, Ginny, I remember you. And he said, and not because you're tall, which I took as a high compliment.
The moving through space thing is something I'm struggling to teach both my early in career people and my sons, because I want them to take up space, but I want them to check their egos. I want them to be proud of themselves, but I don't want them to overly self-promote. There's kind of this constant back and forth as Americans and Western culture really want everyone to be unique. There's all these ads about personal branding and building your brand. You have a section where you call it the elevator speech, though, which is different than your personal brand. I'm curious, your face kind of squinched up there when I said personal brand.
Well, when I think about social media and how many people are trying to brand themselves as something that they're not, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, first of all, get in touch with who you are, because this is where, again, my sort of X-ray vision comes in. I can spot an imposter in a minute, in a second. I can tell when somebody isn't comfortable in their skin. It's very apparent to me. To me, that's what it's about. The brand in a professional context should be about you being able to articulate what you're bringing to the party. How are you adding value? That might be different from what your brand is going to be at home, to the extent that you need one, or with your community, right? So I don't want people to misconstrue the brand. I've elevated my reference to really talk more in terms of a personal narrative. So I think it's consistent with the elevator pitch. The elevator pitch might be derived from this longer form narrative that one needs to establish for oneself, so that very often I say it this way. If I'm interviewing you and I ask the question, tell me about yourself, far too often people would just kind of raise up their resume and say, here, I know, I read that. I want you to tell me what's not on here. I want you to tell me who you are, how you think. There's no right or wrong answer, and that makes people uncomfortable. But to the extent that you know yourself, that will become apparent to me, and that's attractive, because now I can better understand how you might work with other people in the organization and how you see yourself. So I think people need to get comfortable with that and include elements of, like I said, how you think, your personal style, what moves you, what you don't like, what are your aspirations. That's your opportunity to put some stuff out there for people who probably do want to help you.
You use a term in your work, which I really enjoy. It's called affirmations. There's elevator speeches, there's brands, but when you affirm something, you're solidifying it in your mind and you're saying, this is who I am, this is what I am. That seems very intentional. And I see intentionality, deliberate practice, conscious focus in everything that you do. Were you always that deliberate? Because some of us are just flailing and making it up. When did consciousness and deliberation happen?
I think I've probably always been fairly deliberate in things that I did and said. I studied linguistics and French in college, and so I'm very precise with my language. I love words. I used to literally read the dictionary as a kid because I thought it was interesting.
I did that too.
Okay, see, I'm not the only one.
Yeah. I was just like, that's a much better word. I'm going to use that. I'd be like, I was the 12-year-old using big words because it's the better word.
Well, there are all these nuances. Why not get good at really discerning what it is that you mean, right? But I guess, just in terms of being deliberate, I developed a spiritual practice in my 30s after my father passed away. I think I'd always had this orientation of, I had an Alice in Wonderland moment where I stared into the mirror in my bedroom and kind of wondered who I was. I just had a sense that there was more to me than this physical body and what I could see. And so the spiritual practice and guidance that I've had for the last several decades has been really additive. And I think it helps people begin to see themselves differently, to see the connection between us. Again, finding more humanity versus what in corporate parlance can be a very crude and harsh place to be, to the extent that we have lost our humanity.
It's interesting that you say crude and harsh because you're an executive leadership coach enabling capitalists in a crude and, uncomfortable environment. So it's like we have this game that we have to play. We might as well be really good at it. Some may be better than others, and some may have different goals. Is that ever hard to reconcile?
I've been in the game for so long, I understand it. And now, at this point, as you say, from the perspective of an elder, my goal is to help empower people to change the game. Because the game has not included, and it was never designed to include all. I'm not blaming capitalism for that, right? That wasn't the essence of capitalism.
Right, of course.
We can maybe talk about the influences that I think derailed it because it's happened in my lifetime, I believe. I don't struggle with that because I'm trying to offer a compatible transference for those of us still working in the space. We need to be different for everyone. We owe it to the rest of civilization. We're at a seminal point, in my view, and we can't afford to just keep running things the way we've run them. We need leaders who think differently, who are inclusive in the broadest sense of the word, and want to tap into what everyone can bring to the table.
Yeah. A friend of mine who was on the podcast a number of years ago, who passed away a few weeks after the show, named Abel Wang, had a saying, and we all made T-shirts of it, which was, don't accept the defaults.
Love that.
In the computer world where I'm in, when you're installing an application, you can just go next, 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 and you hit finish and the thing got installed.
Yeah.
But then there's always a button that no one ever pushes that says custom, where you get to find out, what is this thing about to do to my computer?
Yeah.
And he always said, you always push custom. You got to push custom because you don't know what's about to happen. It said people are just living their life out there pushing default. And
Yes.
then they're upset when their computer gets messed up or when their life doesn't work out. You've talked about conducting a personal inventory. And I was really struck when you mentioned looking in the mirror, that moment where an executive or a leader or an emerging person needs to pause for a second and go, what the heck am I doing?
That's right.
Am I just letting my life happen by default?
Autopilot.
Yeah, autopilot. It feels like a lot of us are so tired with everything that's going on in the world right now that autopilot is just easier sometimes. And then you wake up and it's like, oh, it's Thursday afternoon. When did this happen?
Except we haven't exercised our choice. And that to me is so sad. We haven't even explored some of the depths of our isness to know what it feels like to find joy, to find satisfaction, to find love. I talk about love. And I don't mean the romantic kind. I just mean, I love you. I have love. I look at people in people's faces and smile because I have love for them. There's some people I don't necessarily like, but I can find it in my heart to have love. To me, that's where we've fallen away. There's room for that now. There's a need for that now.
Is your business powered by Postgres, but the cost of existing ETL tools are breaking the bank? PeerDB is the game changer you've been waiting for. Save up to 5x on costs while seamlessly replicating data from Postgres to data warehouses like Snowflake and Databricks. Their blazing fast technology will ensure real-time replication at any scale. Traditional data movement tools will sacrifice speed, reliability, and features for breadth. The PeerDB solution prioritizes quality over breadth, and they focus on top-notch replication from Postgres to data warehouses. It's cost-effective, it's got blazing fast replication, and it is purpose-built with native features. Some of their success stories replicate 700 million rows monthly with less than a minute latency. They saved 5x, Flatiron migrated 35,000 tables with terabytes of data within a week. Are you ready to optimize your data movement? Try PeerDB today. If you use Postgres at the core of your business, they offer this game-changing solution. You can enjoy a 1-month free trial and an exclusive 25% discount for a year. Just visit peerdb.io/HanselMinutes. That's peerdb.io/HanselMinutes to supercharge your data movement today. People who are watching may be enjoying my facial reactions to the things that you say because I'm lighting up in different places. So I turned 50 last week, and I am fascinated between the difference in empathy that I have now in my 50s versus the complete lack of empathy that my 18-year-old has. And I'm looking at him, and he's an alien. It could be something simple where someone at the fast food restaurant is rude. And my big dad energy that I bring to the situation is, man, I wonder what's going on in this person's life that they needed to snap like that. It's got nothing to do with me or my Diet Coke. My small fry did not push this person over the edge. I'm trying to understand if it's because I have the journey now and I can look back. When did that empathy happen? And how do we, encourage it to grow earlier in our young people and in our leaders?
I honestly don't know other than to model it. My brother said something to me. I only have one sibling. He's only 20 months older, and we're completely different. And we used to bicker and fight and all those things. But he said something more recently. He's like, Ginny, I think his word was softened. And I was like, that's probably fair. Yeah. I was incredibly impatient, still am, driven, not just for driven's sake, but knew that I'm here for a purpose and wanting to find that. And worked in very competitive, aggressive environments. And so I think some of it was that I took on aspects of that in my life. I was known and am still known to be brutally honest. I'm not going to change that. But I think most people know that it's coming from a place of love and caring. I'm not going to try to break you down intentionally. That's never been my goal. But I've learned how to maybe soften the tone just so that it might not be so off-putting for some who aren't used to it.
The softening of the tone has been a challenge when I'm trying to teach young people, because just because it's true doesn't mean that it needed to be delivered with a hammer. And I talk about the envelope versus the message.
Of that.
The shape of the envelope, if it's a hammer, then the message is going to be completely missed. So I'm not a huge fan of the whole compliment sandwich idea, but at the same time, though, you didn't have to be awful when you gave the truthful and conscious feedback.
Absolutely not. And I think that's one of the reasons most people, especially leaders, shy away from giving feedback because they don't feel comfortable and they're putting themselves, here's a sense when it comes that empathy isn't necessarily serving them because they are maybe fearing and recalling when someone came at them and it hurt and they don't want to do that versus acknowledging that you're doing the individual a disservice by not offering them some of this critical feedback. Which one is more important? And from where I'm sitting as a leader, I owe it to you to help you develop and get better at what you do. So let me speak to you through that lens. Some people are going to be, they'll take it personally. Well, they won't like it. But again, to the extent that I can tap in and try to meet you halfway to convey this, that's what I'm obligated to do.
Yeah, I am learning every day. At my current job, I've been there 15 years, which for some people is a very long time. And for me, is only half my career. And just literally today, after this meeting, I was in a leadership team meeting. My boss came back from vacation. He had given us a task, the leadership team. And rather than saying, you didn't do what I needed, this is not what I asked for, he said, what I was looking for was ... And he just left it there and left it to us to go, oh, that's what he was looking for. We didn't deliver it. He didn't say you didn't deliver it. He let us realize that. And in doing it, he just simply clarified what he wanted.
Yeah.
And then we, as a leadership team, are adjusting. And it was such a subtle way of saying, you bunch of morons, you messed up while I was gone and you didn't give me anything what I asked for. But none of that was implied. It was just simply how we decided to react to, oh, I'm clarifying what I needed. And here I am, 15 years into the career, 50 years old. I'm like, wow, I got to write that down. What a masterful way of giving us clear, crisp expectations. But I didn't feel admonished and I didn't feel like anyone was being rude. It was a very conscious way of talking to us.
to me, it sounds like he left room for the possibility that he wasn't clear, right? Because very often I know in my mind, it's blah, blah, here, this is very clear, right? Well, everybody perceives things differently. We forget that. The words on the page may be the same. The way it's taken in is going to change person by person. Doesn't mean you're not smart. Just means we're all different.
Right.
So good on him for using that approach.
Yeah, he was acknowledging that his job as a manager is to create clarity and generate some forward energy. He didn't generate any stop energy. He's a very yes and kind of a manager.
Love that.
So you've talked about the conscious leadership, dimensions of conscious leadership. I wonder if this resonates with you. Like I mentioned before that I've been doing this for 30 years, but I started to be really introspective about my time. And I think I was asleep for maybe 7 years of the 30. So like people walk around going, I got 30 years experience up, and they kind of bonk you on the head with their 30 years experience. But I recognize that there were years where I would just like kind of blinked and the year was gone and I wasn't conscious, wasn't connected. Are you thinking that conscious leaders need to really kind of keep waking up and reminding themselves that I'm here and this is what I'm doing so that those years really matter?
Oh, for sure. We live multifaceted lives. And at midpoint of my career, more or less, well, maybe it was early, in my 30s, mid-30s, I became a single mother. So I had my son and soon after divorced. There are times when I felt as though I had to kind of bridge those two worlds. I had recently started at Spencer Stewart and where it was highly demanding. And so I forced myself in some ways through this practice to make sure that I remained present to the extent that I could for both, first my son, first and foremost, and my job, my career. It was important. It can be hard to do, but it requires, again, for me, it was a meditation practice that helped me find that bridge and at least pull me back to center when I was feeling especially stressed for one reason or another.
It's interesting. Some people may be listening if they've made it this far in the podcast and they may say, wow, this is very practical, but it's always also very woo-woo. But at the same time, I was in an executive leadership coaching session yesterday and they led 5 VPs through a meditation moment, which is, for me as a techie, is a little squishy.
Yes.
So I'm trying to, it's like my audience is technical. I am technical. I think we wish the world would just compile perfectly with 0 errors and the code would run the first way. But there's so much more humanity in our tech community than there is tech.
Sure.
It's nice to kind of remember that is the case.
Well, we don't even breathe enough sometimes. I'm working with someone, coaching someone, and we just talked yesterday about the idea of breath because she was really getting very anxious and upset, not with me, but just about work. And I said, how often do you breathe out? Well, it's time to breathe. That was the response. We're going to work on just breathing out. You can call it woo if you want. It's also a physical shift in your body. When you breathe out, you are relaxing, you're allowing, even for those split seconds.
Yeah. It's also an acknowledgement that we are in these meat bags. We are tools. Yeah. Someone was telling me that we're 3 pounds of Jell-O that's piloting this robot, this biological robot.
That's an image.
It is ridiculous, right? But it's like, wow, there's like 3 pounds of Jell-O piloting this robot, and you're surprised that when you do things to it, that it goes poorly, whether you put bad fuel in it or you put bad energy, or if you're just running tapes. We used to call them tapes in the 70s and 80s, those tapes of childhood stuff and what your parents said. They're always going, you feed garbage in and you're going to get garbage out.
Mm-hmm. It's so true.
So self-reflection is really at the key of being a conscious leader from your perspective.
Yeah. What are you doing at any given moment? Are you making it better? Are you making it worse? Do you even know? Have you asked anybody? How are you engaging with people? You don't have to just be mechanical about it, but just as you're walking around, notice the small things. Look in someone's face. Are they having a bad day? Are they stressed? Are they confused? Ask your team members. It isn't hard, but it's about being human.
Yeah. Remembering to be human is the equivalent of remembering to breathe.
It is. Yes. Well said.
Yeah.
Right. We'll die if we don't breathe. It's just that simple.
I had someone come on the podcast and we were doing the prep. We're in this application that you and I are in right now. And we were getting ready to start. And I just said, are you in the right headspace for this right now? Would it be better if we did this later? And she said, no, I'm just not. I was going to just do this, but I am having an issue right now with some personal stuff. And can we do this in a week?
No.
Like something said, are you in the right headspace? And I wanted to ask it in a way that was respectful.
Yeah.
Without being condescending. And we did it a week later and it was totally great. And they said, I really appreciated you giving me that space. But if I hadn't stopped to breathe and as doing such looked at their face, I wouldn't have seen that question needed to be asked.
There you have it. And how many missed opportunities are there in a day to do that?
Ooh. See, now you just blew my mind, right? Because now I'm looking back on, and this is the other thing, right? You got to look back on your day and you think about those missed opportunities. Then you forgive yourself.
Absolutely forgive yourself.
This is super important.
Yes.
And then reflect on how you can make, the next day that much better. My friend J.D. Myers says, Monday vision, Friday reflection.
I love that.
For me, it's Monday vision and Friday forgiveness. Where you go, okay, I missed a couple of things. I write them down. I put them on my Post-it notes on my monitor. And then Monday's a fresh week, and I try to do better. It's the forgiveness part that is so challenging, especially in times of layoffs and return to work and remote work. I don't know how the C-suite is doing it right now.
I think there's what I would refer to as emotional detachment.
Oof. But see, here you are telling leaders to get in touch with their emotions, but they have to be detached in some of the very difficult parts of their jobs.
I don't necessarily think they need to be. I think they feel that they need to be in executing many of these things. A lot of decisions are made without the empathy, right? The empathetic lens, or they'll just kind of punt, HR will handle this.
Yeah, we've seen those go very badly.
How was it that certain companies in the tech sector laid people off via email? I know some people to whom that happened. Inexcusable, in my view.
Yeah.
Inexcusable. Never should that happen. I'm not excusing the bad behavior. I'm saying that people have made a decision to turn off that awareness. And again, I would suggest that it's at their own peril, ultimately, because they're missing the richness, the ability to connect. Even if you're delivering bad news, have the courage to stand and face somebody and acknowledge them. Have the humanity, right, and the humility to stand and say it to someone.
That really clicked with me. Have the courage to look them in the face, because here I am trying to teach my 16-year-old, my 18-year-old how to look someone in the face, shake their hand, and hand them their resume. My 18-year-old got a job on Main Street at a local place as a dishwasher, and he was going to go online and just send his resume all over the place.
Spray and pray, as I call it.
There you go. So what I had him do is I had him print out 10 resumes. I dropped them off at the top of Main Street, and I said, you walk down one side and the other side, and you pass out resumes. By the fourth restaurant, he had a job, and they had him work that night because he had the courage to look him in the eye. He dressed up, he had his little tie, and he shook their hand. Fast forward, God forbid, if he has to lay someone off when he's in the C-suite, I hope that he also has the ability to look them in the eye and that courage.
It is courage.
It is. It is. Well, I could talk to you for another half an hour, but the show's only a half an hour long. I do want to thank you so much for your time and for everything that you share out there. And I want to point people to your podcast, Fifth Dimensional Leadership, that folks can find all over the places that they can get podcasts on Apple Podcasts. Check out her book at Career Mapping, Charting Your Course in the New World of Work. And of course, GinnyClarke.com. And your Instagram reels are just a joy.
Thank you.
It's just a little spark of, serotonin. Every day you kind of show up and just give me a little something deep to think about.
Great.
And I just want to thank you very much formally for that.
Thank you for paying attention and for welcoming here. I really appreciate it, Scott.
We have been chatting with Ginny Clarke. She's a world-renowned conscious leadership expert. You can check her out at GinnyClarke.com. This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.